Welcome to the EarthWorks podcast, where our team will share the jargon of carbon from many of our turf friends from the past 30 years.
Hi, everybody. I'm Joel Simmons for another EarthWorks podcast, and I am very fortunate to have a returning guest, our dear friend, Armen Suny, who most everybody in the industry knows and has been probably our one of our very highest listened to podcasts in the last year. So I don't know, maybe it's the goofy stories that you like to tell that people tune into, because I got a lot of good feedback, to be honest with you, Armen, and I always enjoy talking to you. And today we want to talk a little bit about a mixed bag, and certainly we want to talk about construction mixes. And I thought Armen would be a good person to talk about, since you've had a lot of experience in that. But I first want to start off by saying, welcome to World Soil Day, which is December 5th. So two soils guys talking on really close to World Soil Day. And it's a little celebration of people thinking about what the hell soil is really all about. And it's still completely misunderstood, isn't it? I still don't get it.
The sweet smell of soil.
The sweet smell of soil. That's what it is. Yeah, it's funny because we talk a lot about on our little weekly nerd conversation here at EarthWorks about soils and the dynamics of it all. And it just amazes me after all these years, and you've been doing it longer, as long as I have, how really we still don't understand how soil really works, and the conflicts in our industry about this and that, and this doesn't work, that doesn't work. And I think I had an epiphany this morning about 3 a.m. All the grief that we've gotten over the years about base saturation and calcium and all this stuff, and how they talk the chemistry of calcium, and how calcium it doesn't do this and it can't do that, and and the reality, and I think you would agree with me here, the reality, and this is the epiphany I had at 3 a.m, which shows you my life and how sad it is. But the epiphany I had was that it's not about the chemistry, it's really about the physics, and what we're trying to do is flocculate the soil. I had an opportunity to meet with some superintendents yesterday, and my favorite word came up a number of times: flocculation. And they were talking about how they got to see the soil flocculate because they were adding calcium. And I really honestly think, and I got this from Lawrence Mayhew, our chemist, that it's not so much the chemistry of the calcium, but it's the flocculation process that allows air and water to move through the soil. And the combination of that improved biological environment and all this chemistry, maybe there's an answer in this. And now, since it's World Soil Day week, I don't know. I mean, I'm throwing this out because I'm rambling, but I thought maybe you'd have some insight for us.
Yeah, I do, Joel, because I've used that in the opposite direction.
Okay.
So we built a golf course up in British Columbia called Sagebrush.
Mm-hmm.
And
Beautiful.
Richard Zokol, who played the tour, and Rod Whitman, the great designer and shaper, and me. How's that for a crew?
That's
so, but one of the things that I did was, and I know you and I talked about it, and I talked about it with Dave Wilbur as well, was I made sure that, because we wanted it to play extremely firm and fast.
Okay, gotcha.
So I made sure that our calcium to magnesium ratio was really low.
Tight.
So that we would have compacted fairways and the ball would run forever. And I remember talking with our superintendent, Norley Calder, great guy at that time. I said, Norley, if the grass starts suffering because we've really closed these soils up, then we'll give it a little calcium, but we'll wait and see. And maybe we just need it. Yeah, maybe we'll just need it where there's a little traffic. We won't need it everywhere. And it worked.
We can manipulate these guys a little bit, right?
Yeah. So we did something agronomically that was bad.
Right.
Because we wanted the game to be played the way we wanted it to be played.
It's funny you say that, because I just had a conversation not too long ago with a grass tennis court manager, and it was the exact same conversation. We want it really firm because I got to get that tennis ball to bounce. So we crunched the magnesium calcium ratio and put more magnesium into the soil, and it got really tight. It was a pain in the ass to keep grass, but it played really well. So it was all good.
The other thing is, it's interesting because so many people struggle with native areas.
Yeah.
They get a little bit of overflow irrigation in the more arid parts of the world and semi-arid parts of the world. But in those parts of the country where it gets natural rainfall, it gets that 30, 35 inches, those things become unplayable. And people spend so much time managing those low maintenance areas, right? Yeah, low maintenance.
Low maintenance, right.
And so I've always said, why don't we go in there and ruin the soil structure?
Mess them up a little bit.
Yeah, why don't we go in there with mag chloride and blow
great.
the soil?
Kill all the biology, tighten the soil up. I love it.
Yeah, and now we'll have playable areas.
Right.
So nobody's done it. I tell guys this, but nobody does it because it's insane. But somebody should try it sometime.
This year's theme for World Soil Day is preventing soil salinization. The heavy, especially in arid parts of the world, salinization being the biggest issue that's preventing them from being able to grow crops. But as I was reading through this, because I was doing some turf talks on World Soil Day, salinization is a very prevalent issue in our business. I mean, these guys, especially out, in the Western, where you cut your teeth, or at least did a lot of work out in Las Vegas area. I mean, that issue is still a massive issue. And, I remember we just did a soil test for our friend Dave Diver, who you know well. And he's still in Vegas, and the soil salinity levels are, I mean, I'm not even sure what to do. I mean, I feel bad for him, but is there an answer here? Let's get some insight from Armen Suny on sodium in soil.
We probably need more pollution.
Yes, probably.
We need more acid rain, even though it doesn't rain much in Vegas.
I knew where you were going with that.
but I was having a conversation with some PhD the other day, and we started talking about the effects of pollution.
Yeah.
And the fact that, as in my opinion, and I don't know this is true, I'm just throwing it out there, as I'm apt to do, that when we got away from coal-fired burners and generating power, that we put less particulate matter in the air, and we probably have less precipitation in certain parts of the country than we used to, and more in others.
Yeah.
But it's something that nobody really talks about. And I remember being at Rolling Green back in 82 and 83, and I was doing pH of the rainfall each time. Somebody was doing a study, and I was one of the study participants, and the pH was in the 4s.
Yeah, it was acid rain, man. We don't have acid rain so much anymore, do we?
No, it's interesting. But
those
you wonder
damn environmentalists, they're ruining everything. Horrible.
But yeah, salinity is an issue. And, in Vegas, it was very interesting when I knew the lady that ran the Southern Nevada Water Authority, and she was really extremely bright. And they were out at the time having meetings with golf course superintendents explaining the benefits of effluent and how effluent was a water saving tool for them. And so I used to run into her in the I used to run into her in the grocery store all the time when we got to be buddies. And she was the smartest woman on smartest person on the Colorado River. Yeah. I mean, she schooled all the other managers on the river from the other states. So I said, Pat, your guys can't keep saying this. I said, because I know that you can pull Colorado River water out that has a lower salinity than the effluent that you're putting on golf courses. And you could do it on a one-to-one basis, which is going to save you 4 or 5% flushing that you would have to do with the effluent. I said, your people can't keep telling people that. And she agreed, and they finally stopped telling that. They had an infrastructure problem. They did not. This was not about water quality or conservation. This was an infrastructure problem that they did not have big enough pipes to deliver all that fresh water to the golf courses and all the growth.
Oh, really? What was the argument to suggest that effluent was beneficial?
Well, they were just, it was environmentally good, and they were telling people it saved water.
Get rid of effluent was the good.
Yeah. But they were on a one-to-one basis. They could put it in below the dam and then pull out cleaner Colorado River water at the dam and save 4 or 5% of flush.
I don't mean to put you on the spot, but do you have any idea what the percentage of golf courses are that are on effluent? Do we know that? Is that a statistic that's available? I have no idea.
Yeah, I don't know, but I know a lot now are going to desal.
Yeah.
When they're doing it. So.
Here's a thought, and we're just gonna ramble. So if you don't mind, I'm gonna ramble. I think you and I have talked about this. One of the things that Kevin Hicks and I have been promoting is the idea of bringing in small RO systems for spray tank applicators. For putting, just you can get a small little RO system. And I'm sure you've seen them mounted on the wall for a couple $1,000, another $1,500. You get a 2,500 gallon plastic tank. You fill it up with RO water. You use that in your spray tank so that you don't have these contaminants going into your spray tank mix. Are you seeing this anywhere? I mean, I've seen a few places. I love the idea. Maybe it's a stupid idea, but I thought I'd ask you about it.
No, I think it's a great idea, and I've never thought of it before. It makes
and I'm not selling
sense.
RO systems. Don't get me wrong.
No.
There's no commercialism here. I just like the idea.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see the difference in what a bricks meter reading would be from an RO tank versus your standard water tank.
Yeah. Well, we're thinking
really
about
interesting.
We're thinking about it really solely for the influence, so that the chemistry that we might be putting in our tanks, regardless of what it is, pesticides, fertilizers. So we're not having alkaline hydrolysis issues. We're not having tank mix issues. And I think the efficacy of a spray tank can be significant. Kevin Hicks and I talk about this all the time, and he's convinced that the return on investment by simply creating greater efficacy of that spray tank, be it an herbicide or a fungicide, whatever, my fertilizer, is going to increase enough to justify the cost fairly quickly. And they're pretty simple units these days. We use RO water in our fertility plant. When we build fertilizers, everything is RO, so we don't have chemical reaction. And the same concept would be, I mean, you're running a couple 100 gallons, when you go out and spray, but you fill up a 2,500 gallon tank, you got enough water for at least a few days, if not longer. And it's not an expensive thing, and it would create a much more impacting effect on that spray.
It's funny because I always thought about that for irrigating greens.
Yeah, but I guess that would be more expensive. I like that idea, but that would be more
expensive. But even a work cart mounted unit,
right?
That when a guy was hand watering a green, that he was running through RO. And then also, I always thought about refrigeration on that same unit. So you could put cool, clean water down.
Cooling it down as well. I mean, you'd mentioned the idea of flushing. I mean, maybe this is a concept too in flushing, because, worst thing that we do is we try to flush out this, sodium out of water with water.
Salt with salt.
Full of sodium. I mean, it kind of beats the whole purpose, doesn't it? So let's talk about, you and I, when we last spoke, we ended up our conversation talking a little bit about the construction mixes as they are today. You are very, how do I say this eloquently, very opinionated on some ideas on construction mix and the whole gambit of things. Let's talk about it from Armen Suny's perspective. Where are we? Where are we going? Where have we been? What's good? What's bad? How do we fix things? How do we make things better? Why the hell do we do some of the silly things that we do? I mean, it's your table. Start talking.
Yeah, it's interesting. I used to love when I consulted, which, I don't do much of that anymore. But when I consulted and I'd go on a putting green and we'd be looking at the collars. Now, I know we're overgrowth regulating these longer grasses, and we need to deal with that. And I know you have ways of doing that as well. But we would go look at the green and we'd look at a collar that got the least amount of traffic. And then we'd go to an adjacent tee, which is, cut at the same height, might be the same grasses, a lot of the same practices, not nearly as intensive the practices. And the tee that got a lot more traffic would be in better shape. And I would say to the superintendents, how'd you build this tee? Well, typically they had 6 inches of some lousy sand. Maybe they had peat in it. Maybe they didn't. Sometimes there was decent drainage in it. Sometimes it was just, a single line. And they're dead flat, basically. If there's a % fall in them, that's pretty good. And I'd say, well, why is the tee with all the traffic and it's not built to the same standards? Why is it in better shape than your collar that gets no traffic?
Any answer?
No, they wouldn't have an answer.
Because they wouldn't know, right?
Yeah. I said, why don't we build the green like we built the tee? and it'll be in better shape then. And well, no, you can't do that.
No, that goes against spec.
Yeah. Why can't you do that? And so I would have fun, because I like to challenge people, just like I used to get challenged. I still get challenged by smart people. So I like to challenge them and get them thinking about it. And that led me to the fact that, or the opinion that we should probably be teaching logic and deductive reasoning as a turf class.
Yeah.
Because I don't know in all of agriculture where we have created what I call a false water table, not a perched water table. I like false, it sounds worse. Where in all of agriculture have we done this, especially but it's basically a hydroponic situation. And maybe rice paddies, we do it a little bit. I don't know. Maybe there's something in horticulture or agriculture where we do it. But why do we spend all that money to create a false water table that has less roots every year?
Yeah.
Year one, we have roots in the gravel. Year two, we might have 8 or 10 inches. And year three, we have 6 to 8 inches, and that's all you're ever going to have.
Yeah.
Why would we spend more to get less roots?
Do me a favor, and just for folks that may not know, explain the concept of a perched water table or a false water table, as you're calling it. Just
I think it was I'm convinced it was an accident.
I wouldn't argue that.
Yeah, and I asked Dr. Deutsch, I called him many years ago, but Joe Deutsch, I said, Joe, you could tell me. I said, when they started with the USGA greens, I said, they thought they were going to get something that really drained well because they put a bunch of sand on top of gravel and they just figured it drained. Right. And then when it created a perched water table, they started selling everybody on the benefit of a perched water table, of which there is no benefit.
Is that your theory?
That is absolutely.
I like it.
Yeah. So if you think about it, for those of us of our age, Joel, we can probably remember the Greek sponge divers.
Yeah.
And now there's these free divers that can go down and hold their breath for 10 minutes and go all the way down. I mean, it's amazing. Well, that's what a USGA green is. It only breathes when it gets flushed. It's the only time it takes a really deep breath.
Right.
All of a sudden, the bottom drops out. And it sucks atmospheric gases in. Yeah. But from that point forward, it's basically holding its breath.
Yeah. Especially
since everybody's replacing evapotranspiration, which is, as we know, is a phony number.
Yeah.
But when we build these high-tech push-up greens that are basically a roughened soil, not glazed like a USGA green or a California, not glazed, with as much drainage as you need based on your conditions of how much it rains and your water quality. The more it rains and the worse your water quality is, the more drainage you need and the closer the spacing needs to be. And we put sand on top of that. What happens is that the only day it doesn't breathe is the day it got watered. From that point forward, gravity and those finer textured soils are pulling atmospheric gases in. Right. We know that there's nothing that gets thatched up faster than wet sand.
Right. Especially one with a lot of nitrogen in it.
Yeah. And no biology.
No biology. No digestion.
Yeah. And when you start building greens like this, there's a couple things you can do. You can add a soil component to the sand because it will drain.
Yeah.
You can obviously, you and I, we like life in soil. So you can find a way to get life in soil, whether it's compost, other ingredients, things that you want, that, you like to put in there. Now you've got something that, and I remember Joe Deutsch again, when he came out with the A's and G's, we were talking, I go, Joe, I said, you now made it so you have to pick your grass cultivar before you pick your construction method. He goes, what do you mean?
That's true. Yes.
I said, well, if we're going to top dress with the material that we built the greens out of, which is what everybody said up until 10 years ago, that you need to top dress with the exact same stuff you built the green out of so you don't have to get these layering problems. But if you're going to do that, you can't top dress these finer texture, these generation 3 bank grasses, I call them, you can't top dress them with a USGA mix. So you might need to have a finer sand, and you might need to have 18 or 20 inches of it. So the bottom will drop out on the gravel. And he said, you might be right. I go, yeah, I might be right. So what happens now is if you go to a high-tech push-up, you can use finer sands that you can actually top dress with the same stuff you built the green out of.
Just the straight sand, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and we ruined plenty of great push-up greens with straight sand, by the way.
Yeah.
We should have been using an 811 or something with some soil in it. And it still amazes me. And I've done it too. You know, trust me, I've made every mistake you can make. And I love it when I see guys with push-up greens that have not put drainage in yet.
Yeah.
You know, they're getting to be 4, 5, 6 inches. You know, once you get past 1 or 2 inches, you need to start thinking about putting drainage in push-up greens, old push-up greens. But then I see them putting deep tine aeration on push-up greens. I'm like, wait, do you want to get more water into those heavier soils that can't take them? Shouldn't we be trying not to let as much get in there? Let it run off on top?
They're not. You don't think they're trying to create channels to get the water out?
If you think about it, if there's nowhere, if you have a heavier soil, where's the water going? Yeah. I don't care how much you get into it. Where's it going?
Yeah.
Yes, you have more surface.
It's got to stop at some point, right?
Yeah. You have more surface area. And I always wanted to use directional boring on a push-up green.
Directional boring? Explain that.
Yeah, I always wanted to put the drainage in on push-up greens without touching the surface. To do directional boring at the sand soil interface.
Okay.
And nobody ever seeing it happen.
Has it ever happened? I've never heard of that.
No. I started thinking about that.
Suny idea.
Yeah. I was getting my knee scoped at a hospital once.
That's where it came from.
30 years ago.
An epiphany.
And I saw a flow mold truck out in the parking lot or out on the street, and I saw a guy with this wand making a big sweeping 90-degree turn. So I went back out to the flow mold truck and said, "What are you guys doing?"
You left your surgery and talked to the flow mold guy.
I got there early. Yeah.
Okay.
So I went out and talked to him. They said, "Well, yeah, we're putting a line in." I said, "Well, your guy just made a 90-degree turn." He goes, "Well, depending on what we're putting through there, we can choose an arc and we can make 90-degree turns." And obviously, in the oil industry now with the fracking, I know guys that can go 2 miles and be within a foot. So directional boring has a lot of potential uses on golf courses that we just haven't thought about. Yeah. And we ought to be looking at that.
Oh, that's interesting. Anybody looking into that? Have you heard anything on that?
No, I give guys, put this stuff out to smart guys and wait for them to tell me what works or doesn't work.
Think about this. Tell me how stupid or if this will work at all. If this will work. So where are we today with this whole? I mean, there's still a lot of up and down, although I'm seeing more guys. As a matter of fact, I had a conversation with a superintendent yesterday that's using an 80-10-10 mix, soil and peat moss.
Yeah.
So there's starting to be a migration, at least toward understanding the value of bringing in some colloidal material, which will give you at least some holding capacity. Is that a trend?
Yeah. Oh yeah. We're definitely hearing it, and I think the thing remains though, if you're going to put that over a gravel blanket, then you need to absolutely evaluate how much material you need over top of that, so the bottom can drop out.
Right.
Because it's going to be more.
Yeah. That's another thing. And again, just the other day, meeting with a superintendent, they're talking about depths of the mix and how it kind of evened things out by moving the depth up and down, left and right, in and out.
Which we've all seen. I mean, I remember seeing, I won't talk about what golf course this was on, but I remember seeing 7 inches on a hillside that was wet all the time.
Yeah.
And 29 inches, 15 feet away that was dry all the time.
Yeah.
So we know variable depths work. But again, I think that, Joe, if we're looking at sandy materials, shouldn't we go mimic nature? Shouldn't we go look at some of these golf courses where grass has been growing on sand for 100 years or more?
Where would we find that?
Yeah, lots of places.
Yeah.
And shouldn't we look at what's there and say, wow, that works? Maybe we should replicate that, not put some engineering solution
Yeah.
On a biological and engineering system. So, I think that we need to evaluate that. And if you did, you'd certainly see that, there's more organic in the top and less as you go down. And that's the way nature does it. I don't know why we can't understand nature and mimic nature.
Yeah, it's always baffles me is that when you see these reports coming back saying way too much organic matter in the top inch. Well, where would you want your organic matter? I mean, isn't that? And besides, they don't answer the question: is it good organic matter or is it not good organic matter?
Is it humus or thatch?
Humus or thatch? Hey, thank you. It's a simple question. What was the native soil like when you got to Shadow Creek? What was that like? I mean, that was desert soils, but was it? I mean, how would you describe that?
Yeah, it was a little bit on the silty side, gravelly, silty.
Okay.
Yeah, but I had that farm out in just across the Nevada border in California in Sandy Valley, called Valley Sod Farm now, and we were on basically our first pivot was on silt, and it was moon dust. When it was dry, you'd step on it and your foot would sink in and it would come up over the top.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's a good place to grow grass.
Yeah. Well, actually, it was a heck of a crop.
Probably was, wasn't it, actually?
Yeah. Who did I have out there? Did I have Arden Anderson? I had one of those guys come out, one of the smart guys from Acres come out and we went over the soils and I put way more in than I should have, but it made an amazing crop. Yeah. But then we had
brilliant. We know Arden very well. Jerry was very close with Arden.
But we had some sandy stuff as well.
Yeah.
And so they're all different, but the soils there are pretty variable, especially when you've moved millions of yards of dirt at Shadow Creek. So
right.
You had different stuff all over. But we were using Colorado River water though. It was potable, and we moved over. I moved a bunch of water over from the old Dunes course in the years when you could move stuff a big distance in the valley, and you couldn't do that today. But I think so. We moved over enough to do to reduce that. About 40% was coming out of wells at that point, and the water quality was decent.
But the greens were all USGA spec, right?
Kind of, yeah.
Kind of because you kind of you were the kind.
No, just because the depths were a little variable.
Okay. What's your take on peat moss today?
I think organic should provide some life to the soil. And peats are fine. But I'd rather have something that's got life in it.
Yeah, I say that a lot, and a lot of the guys that I work with, say to me, "Oh, I know you don't like peat moss." It's not that I don't like it, but like you said, organic should provide life. And I think the idea of peat moss was designed to basically be a moisture reservoir. And tell me if you think I'm crazy on this, but after 10 years and you dig up an old USGA spec with 20% peat moss, you end up having these big softballs because the peat moss actually migrates to each other, and you end up with these big wads of peat, and then you get these hydrophobic conditions and these localized dry spots. I mean, it's certainly consistent with what I've seen. Does that make any sense to you?
Well, again, you're talking about it was an engineering solution.
Right. Yes, it was.
We need a way to hold moisture in the sand.
Yes.
In the complete absence of biology.
Right.
And so again, it was flawed from the start.
Yeah. It just doesn't make sense. What's your take on the spec itself? I mean, the actual particle size analysis.
Well, it doesn't work because of the we've lost our minds because
this is exactly why we have you on. Exactly.
Yeah, because people don't even understand what top dressing is anymore.
Yeah, explain that.
They don't, because top dressing is the uniform application of a material into the turf canopy.
Okay. What is it today?
Well, we're grooming and punching little holes and dragging it into those.
Yeah.
That isn't necessarily top dressing.
Yeah.
So
no.
And the reason for that, and that's why you see so many people now going to these super fine sands, which means you're going to have to go be aerating more often, putting coarser sands back in. And this goes against everything the USGA told us and all of our physics soils teachers told us up until the last 10 years. Interesting. What's changed? Has soil physics changed in the last 10 years?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think so.
Has it ever changed?
No. And that's why I think this is completely flawed. And that in order to do this, to top dress with the same material we build these greens out of, we need to either put more finer sands over this gravel blanket, which I'm against, or we need to go to high-tech push-ups where you can build your greens out of finer sands and soil components.
But when you say finer sands, aren't you advocating a situation that potentially is going to just clog up that pore space with those little fines filling in all the holes? I'm playing devil's advocate here.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we've all seen, well, I don't know if we've all seen it, but we've seen blow sand that grows some pretty darn good grass.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think, selection of the gradation of these sands is always critical, whether you're building a USGA or you're doing a high-tech push-up. Now, the thing I've always found amusing about the specs is having a gravel spec. I could put 20% marbles in a sand, and it's going to perform just fine.
Right? Have you ever done that?
Well, I've done something close. I've done something close to that, where I had a sand that had 20% that was above the 2 millimeter, and built greens out of it, and they were bulletproof.
With that, and you top dress it, it doesn't just fill up all the
and then I had them screen the top off.
Oh, okay.
And then put that on the top, and then we top dressed with that stuff. But one was $7 a ton delivered. This was 15 years ago, and the screened one was $14 a ton. Right. So it would not, and they would not pass any test. But they would also grow 20 inches of roots. So I guess it worked.
And the 20 inches of roots is because there's air in the soil, and they have a place to go, and maybe they can go hunt for water and nutrients. And
well, grass doesn't hunt for water, contrary to popular belief.
Okay.
Yeah. What happens is when we water too frequently, it sloughs off its roots.
Right.
And all the roots are in the top. Yeah. It doesn't say, well, there's water down there, let me go chase the water. That just doesn't happen. But what happens is when you irrigate deeply and infrequently, and I know that's as big a subject as soils.
Yeah, we could have another day on that one.
Yeah. That what happens then is as you're sucking the moisture down, you're bringing atmospheric gases in, and if you don't seal the top off every day, you'll have more roots deeper. I mean, that's just all there is to it. You need gas exchange.
Yeah. I mean, our friend Dave Wilbur tells the story where he had a client standing on his green, and he said, look, Flush, just pour water. He goes, this thing's puddling around my ankles. He goes, I know, just stay there. And then all of a sudden, kaboom, it just went boom. And gosh, the next day, the place looked fantastic. It colored up. Everything was great. I mean, deep and infrequent, but it's not, a lot of guys will say that that's not possible in lots of places like the mid-Atlantic where it's all humidity, or, in the Carolinas where it's all humidity, to be able to manage a soil in that fashion. Is that a fair statement? Easy statement? Well,
since I've done it there, I say it's an unfair statement. But what's happened though, since I was there, Joel, and this is, the carts are in fairways now, so the world changed. So I don't know if a guy could do it now since they're driving in carts. Because, if you do it on a Sunday and you don't have carts on the fairways till Monday, you're probably in decent shape. Or till Tuesday, you're probably in decent shape. But, can you do that in the middle of August? No, you're going to have to punt.
So let's talk to a young superintendent who is now in charge of his first property. How does he or she best top dress? I mean, what's the art of top dressing to somebody that's getting into the business, or just really getting their feet under them in this industry? What advice do you give them?
Well, I think the first thing they have to do is stop putting growth regulators on their collars and cleanup passes.
Okay, that's fair.
Go
ahead, explain that though.
Or I didn't see a turning board until about 5 years after growth regulators showed up.
Well, that's
I wonder, is there any correlation there? Let me think about that. Wait, we have, well, first of all, we know that the leaf absorbed growth regulators are much more absorbed on longer leaf blades. We know that.
Yeah, of course.
And we know that those areas receive cleanup passes, receive a lot of traffic, and they're always the worst part of a green.
Yeah.
So why are we restricting growth on those areas?
Yeah.
And guys said, well,
very good question.
Yeah, we can't not do that. I'm like, you probably could. Now we got all these GPS sprayers and all this stuff, and it might mean you need to spray more often, so you have different things going out at different times. But certainly with some of the growth regulators or leaf absorbed, you can wash them off right away. You can go around and make a pass with something that's got some gibberellic acid and release the regulation. When you're aerating, you can go out and put some good natural organic fertilizers in the cleanup pass and the collars and the first bit of short grass that's getting beat up all the time. So there's a lot of ways. Now, I say that because every time we top dress, those areas that aren't growing as much or receive more traffic get beat up more.
Yeah,
we're shooting ourselves in the foot one more time.
Yeah.
So I look at it and I think, first of all, let's take care of the fundamentals. Let's not shoot ourselves in the foot that way.
Right.
Now we could talk about top dressing. And what I've seen is some guys that are, Doug Peterson, you probably know Doug.
I know Doug well.
Yeah, one of the best grass growers
Baltimore
I
Country
ever
Club.
met.
I used to sled on Baltimore Country Club when I was a kid. Never knew what a golf course was, but I'm sure at that time I would sled over greens. Today they would shoot you, but back in that day, I used to sled down that property.
Yeah, and so Doug sent me pictures of the greens at Crenshaw's course, Austin Golf.
In Austin, yeah.
Yeah, that had not been core aerated in 11 years. So it's probably about 14 or 15 now. It looked like the best growing I've ever seen in my life.
Really?
Yes, it was perfect.
So are we advocating not aerifying?
And no, he did all kinds of, he punched every kind of hole, put every kind of slit in those greens you can imagine.
He just didn't pull a core.
He didn't pull cores. Yeah, Bill Shrum's doing it up at Shooting Star. The guy Prairie Dunes doing the same thing. So you have guys out there. This is the highest level of golf course maintenance. And there's lots of people doing it now. It's becoming, but I also see those same guys using very low amounts of nitrogen.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I have this conversation a lot of times. Why would you want to pull a core on a good, healthy soil unless there was a reason to pull a core, like lots of thatch or lots of layers? But if you're doing the right thing and you're letting biology digest that organic matter and you've got good organic matter, you really want to take that out?
So now to have good biology, don't we need air?
I've heard that. I don't know if it's true.
Yeah, we need gases going both directions. And if we're sealing the top off every day with water, we're going to have less biology.
I've heard that. Yeah. I say in my classes, what's the most important nutrient in turf? And everybody says nitrogen, calcium. And the answer is always air. And I want to sell them air. I want to bring in a 275-gallon tote of air, but nobody seems to bite on that yet. But yeah, air is the most important thing. I tell this story often, and this is a true story. And I don't know if you've ever heard it, but when I was teaching at Rutgers, I would go around.
The dark days. When they let you, influence these young minds.
Yes, exactly. And luckily, they stopped me from that before it went on too far. But I asked the class one time, how long can we go, without water? And, it's 2, 3, 4 days. And I said, okay, well, how long can we go without air? And a guy in the back of the room, and I swear this is a true story, a guy in the back of the room raises his hand. He says, I don't know, about a day. And that was where I was at the time. And so, I keep driving home the importance of oxygen. And that's really what it's all about in biology is air. If you don't have air, you got we can't breathe for more than, except for those deep divers that you just talked about. But they're rare. They got huge lungs. But, everything is oxygen. So that's why you see, roots going down the channels of aerification holes, because there's air there. It's all about air. And that's why physics, the three-legged stool, chemistry, physics, biology, that kind of follows each other. Chemistry affects physics, affects biology. So, and I'm preaching and ranting. I apologize. This is your show.
Well, I just love when I go to the tire store and they want to sell me nitrogen for my tires.
Yes. I had that happen recently, actually.
I'm already getting like 80 to 81%. I don't need it. I don't need the extra 20% for an extra fee.
Yeah, exactly. For a lot of money, as a matter of fact, it's a lot of money. So again, let me ask you this: is there a bad way to top dress? I mean, what would, if you saw somebody doing something really bad, what would it look like in terms of just top dressing on a golf course green?
Well, yeah, I mean, anytime somebody over top dresses and beats it to death, that's a problem. There's a couple of things. One is I think it needs to be a lot, you're trying to match the growth rate, right? Hopefully we're controlling the nitrogen we're not getting crazy with the growth rate. And you're trying to match the growth rate with your sand. And you want enough in there so that you can smooth the surface. Now, if you're going out with a hand spreaders and dry sand and you're brooming it in lightly, you're really not smoothing things out. You're doing thatch dilution, but you're not smoothing things out. And I've always been a fan of a cocoa. I think a cocoa mat's the right thing because it does both. It pulls it into the low spots and it still gets it into the canopy. And you can pull those by hand. You don't have to get a machine on there to do that. But I think that,
are cocoa mats losing favor in the business?
Oh yeah, they absolutely are. But you can.
Is there a reason for that?
Yeah, because there's no easy way. Brooming it, you can put a bunch of guys out with brooms or the big brooms, and it goes and it's and the cocoa's just cumbersome for a guy to drag, having dragged one before. But I understand. But you want to get things. The top dressing had two things: one, thatch dilution, but also to smooth the surface. And now, obviously, a lot of greens, we're rolling them enough now that they're getting pretty smooth by accident. So the need for it's a lot less. So the brooming's become much more in favor. So that's, to me, too much top dressing or too much nitrogen, not enough top dressing. Those are the downfalls.
What's your take on top dressing fairways, soil fairways?
Yeah, an inch is fine. A dirty sand of an inch is pretty good.
And a dirty sand, by definition of Armen Suny, is
whatever doesn't cost much and is around. I don't know, Joel.
Soil. I mean, you're talking about adding soil to a top.
Something that's definitely got soil in it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So something that's closer to matching the soil profile that you're top dressing with.
Yeah, and if you've got something that's straight sand and a good price and nearby, and you can core aerate and dirty it up a little bit yourself, that's okay too. But I see it all the time when we get to have guys having 3-4 inches of sand. Well, you now need to have internal drainage, and when it's straight sand, you firm things up, and now you're growing thatch like a son of a gun.
Yeah,
because you'll thatch up on grass like you can't believe, on sand like nothing you can seen before.
You took all the biology out.
Yeah, I mean, look at how many approaches we've seen guys started sand top dressing. The first year it was awesome. Second year it was really good, and all of a sudden now they're thatched up, and it's worse than it was before.
Yeah, it's a mess. It's a mess.
But you could top dress with the right things and really gain ground. And I'm not sure what those right things are. You have to figure that out. But it's certainly got something that's got a soil component in it and life.
So I mean that's one. I mean the whole, and I don't want to make this political in any way, but the whole USGA spec and the program. I mean, the growing program was tons and tons of nitrogen. And, I remember the early 90s going around and I'd see these guys growing in golf courses, either on an 80-20 or a 90-10, which is nothing but peat moss, and putting down 10 pounds of N through growing. And they grew the most beautiful crop of thatch that I'd ever seen, and then the architect leaves and the construction guys leave and the poor superintendent is standing there wondering, what the heck am I going to do now? I've got literally 3 inches of thatch that I have to manage. And we just spent millions of dollars on this golf course,
it's, and plus they're up and down the elevator.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. It's growing, it's not growing. It's growing, it's not growing. But
hot and cold, up and down.
Yeah. But again, I kind of go back to us looking at sandy soils. So let's go look at a good green that's got sand on it, that's been well maintained, it's got life in it. And let's look at that and see how much N is sitting in that green.
Yeah.
What's the potential reserves of nitrogen in that green that if it's biologically active can produce that? And I've been so bad at it times that I eventually got to where I was decent at it, to where we had greens, first year greens that acted mature by the end of their first season.
Yeah.
And I'll never publicly admit how much natural organic fertilizer was in those things.
Yeah, don't admit that.
No,
that's heresy anyway.
Yeah. But I think what we have to do with those grow-ins is to make sure that we create a similar reserve of long-term, mid and long-term N in those greens,
right,
that we would have in an existing mature green. And you can get them to behave their first year instead of waiting 3 years to figure it out. And for the biology, and by creating biology on the front side, that you're not going to wait 3 years for all the weird stuff to stop happening.
Yeah, right. I mean, what you're talking about is growing in with a balanced carbon to nitrogen. I mean, that's basic agronomy. That's not anything Armen, Suny, or Joel Simmons made up. I mean, I advocated, I think you advocated, and obviously I made a career off of it. But by balancing carbon to nitrogen in the grow-in, you're growing in with a lot less nitrogen. And so your costs are a little bit safer. You're not having this huge flush of growth. And most importantly, and we advocate this daily, you're not growing thatch, which is the worst thing to come out of a construction. You know, all this hard work, and you got all this stuff, and then all of a sudden you're trying to manage this 1 or 3 inch of thatch, and it's impossible to manage. I mean, I never understood it. Yeah. But that was what the spec was telling us.
Right. And and I think those guys have all gotten better. Remember, it's not a spec; it's a recommendation.
Yes, sorry, I didn't mean to misspeak.
If it's a specification, there's liability involved.
I stand corrected. I apologize. I apologize. So,
and I have suggested in writing that potentially that the industry views it as a specification, therefore there may be liability, but that's me having fun.
Forget that. They can't have
that's just me having some fun.
Yeah, no, that's just absurdity. So we're seeing more and more construction amendments. I mean, we've been doing it for 20 some years now, amending these mixes, trying to mimic through application a soil in a soilless medium, trying to build some holding capacity in organic matrix and mineral matrix. We've been doing this for a long time. We've seen a lot of guys all over the world starting to really change their thought process. And I'm seeing guys that are growing, their sand greens on, less than a couple of pounds of nitrogen a year because they got life in their soil finally. I mean, is that absurd?
No, Joel, and I think one of those things that's pretty interesting to me is that, and you and I have talked about it, and my silly question about how much stromium does a grass plant need, right? But I think that, so many times I went to golf courses, and as soon as I got off the sand, where the bent grass had crept out into, or the Bermuda had crept out, and usually those finer textured Bermudas aren't creeping out much. But when these grasses have crept out onto the native soil, they looked better than the stuff on sand. Wow. And I'd ask the superintendent, well, why does that look better? And they wouldn't really have an answer that made any sense. And so that got me thinking about, what we were missing in these hydroponic situations, because let's face it, unless we have soil in there, even with 10% soil, it's still almost hydroponics.
Yeah, it's better than nothing, but it's almost hydroponic. Yeah. And so what we do to give these plants the most chance for success nutritionally, so that the bugs have the right stuff, so that the soils, the grass has the right stuff. And to me, it was, sea kelp meal was the answer, and put some of that into the equation. Give that plant everything there and let it figure it out. Let the plant figure it out. I mean, and we're getting so much better as an industry on that whole concept. I mean, the problem, and I've lived this for 35 years. It's relatively esoteric, because biology is a dynamic science, and it's hard to quantify and hard to qualify, and it's not well researched. Certainly not on in the 10 by 10 plots, but we're seeing more and more. I had a conversation yesterday with superintendents, and they were all saying, these were young guys, and they were all saying, everybody is looking into carbon-based fertility and understanding that this has to be a part of the process. It doesn't have to be exclusive, but balancing carbon to nitrogen is really what we're talking about. And it's so incredibly basic to agronomy. And that's what you were doing back in before any, you had to be called every name in the book as well as I was. Putting out kelp, that's heresy, dude. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
What are you wasting your money for? Just put out urea.
I want to change directions. I know that's shocking. I've never changed directions.
It's your show.
So let's talk about grass cultivars.
Oh, please. That's always fun.
Yeah. And the cool season, because in the warm season world, you don't really have many choices.
It doesn't matter, right?
Yeah. You got 3 on greens, basically, at this point, until we start talking about the zoysias, which are pretty interesting on greens.
And they're getting much, much, much better.
Yeah. Yeah. But in the cool season world, I remember having this conversation with my good friend Richard Zokel, who played the tour, and we were talking about grasses. And I started talking about that there's a certain amount of density that you need on a bentgrass green to create a quality roll. That any density over and above that was added friction and meant you needed to cut the green lower to get the same speeds.
Gotcha.
And he instantly got it. Matter of fact, I don't even think I said friction. I just said you need to cut it lower. And he goes, because of friction. I'm like, yeah, I guess that's it. Yeah.
Slows the ball down.
Yeah. And so here we have all these grasses that are super dense today, because if you want to win the NTEPs, be dark green and be dense. There's nothing in the NTEPs about quality of roll or height to achieve speed.
Right.
There's nothing about putting quality.
No, there isn't, is there?
No.
They never once talk about that, do they?
This is absurd.
Yeah.
And so my good friend Leah Brillman, probably
I know Leah very well. Yes.
As good a plant breeder as there is on the planet.
Brilliant mom.
And because one of the things people talk about is the density of these new bent grasses keeps the PO out. Well, she thinks there's a little something to that, but she thinks it's more that the breeders have done a good job of earlier spring growth and later fall growth with these newer bent grasses.
Oh, really?
And that really is what's helping keep the PO out. And I suspect she's probably right that, is that 3/4 of it and the rest is the density? I don't know. But, I look at the beauty contest of these bent grasses in the NTEPs.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to me that, nobody's shouting saying, wait, what about putting quality? Well, and I heard, because the plots are only this big. I'm like, well, make bigger plots.
Yeah, exactly. Make bigger plots. Put them on a green.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, you don't know what you have bent grass wise until they're 5 years old.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, they always.
And the other thing is that I could probably manage all of them to determine a winner or some subset that has a similar characteristics to be a winner based upon how I managed it. So I always discounted those NTEPs and didn't think much of them.
You said something interesting. They're breeding them so that you get spring and fall, but that doesn't that essentially leave in that middle area density? I mean, doesn't that promote density because it's now tightening up?
Yeah, and they've done a remarkable job with these grasses. I mean, they're beautiful. I mean, I love to look at them.
Right.
But some of them tend to be pretty thatchy in their compared to others.
So what do you like? I hate to put you on the spot again, but anything good out there?
I haven't been involved that much.
You're a Penn Stater, so you're going to like the Penn Cross series or whatever, the A's and all that stuff.
Yeah, I just haven't been involved in growing anything for so long that that I know people that are success. Let's put it this way: great superintendents can grow great grass on a parking lot.
And that's true. Yeah.
So if you give great superintendents different cultivars, they're going to be successful.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. They'll figure it out.
And like you said, in 5 years, they're going to be different anyway.
Yeah.
They're going to change in time and all that kind of stuff. So where are we going in the next handful of years with construction of greens? I mean, what's the future of greens mix?
Well, let me talk about something, part of that. And that is when I see these people that are trying to go bent grass in places where it's really challenging. I mean, really, really challenging.
Like the mid-Atlantic?
Well, or even worse. I mean, I talked to a gentleman the other day that's grown in someplace way tougher than that even.
Okay.
And the fact with humidity. And so because you can grow bentgrass in the desert, until it gets to be like 115, 120, then you start, having an issue.
You mean May? Yeah.
Yeah. But with these high-tech in the ground systems, for cooling and heating, it's pretty cool. For a guy that's completely against all that stuff, I really find it very interesting. It's
fascinating,
and pretty cool.
Isn't it?
Yeah. How much you can manipulate the environment.
Yeah.
So, on one hand, I'm like, get rid of all that stuff. On the other hand, I'm like, if you're growing at some place where it's really challenging,
well, you shouldn't have bentgrass.
Yeah. Why not go all the way? And generally speaking, most of those systems need a gravel blanket.
Yeah.
So
kind of protection.
Yeah. So at that point, I start thinking, okay, if I was going to do that, I'd have the gravel blanket, all the bells and whistles, and I'd suck air and push air and heat and cool.
Air condition, cool. Yeah.
Yeah. But I'd probably have 20 inches of a 811 sitting on top of it.
Yeah.
Or whatever the science worked out to,
Yeah.
the physics worked out to the bottom of the drop.
The move back in the 90s was more, and again, back in your old neighborhood and where I am in this mid-Atlantic, moving bentgrass south, and now it's reversing. Now you're seeing guys pulling all that bentgrass out and going back to Bermuda grasses or zoysia, which I think is, getting better and better all the time. But you're seeing that. I mean, even like, the Philadelphia Eagles are running, Bermuda grass, and they were told you can't do that in Philadelphia, but their base is Bermuda, and it works, especially on an athletic field.
Yeah. Rolling Green still has some Bermuda on it.
Well, of course, it's all
Philly.
just stuck there somehow. Yeah.
And, I'll never forget being with, Dean Graves and seeing all the Bermuda at his course.
Yeah.
And so
which one? Yeah. I mean, that whole area is just laced with Bermuda, Chevy and Bethesda. And
And the Bermuda got pretty well up into Philly. Richie Valentine told me this, that 60 and 61, they had two bad winters. So all the guys that had gone Bermuda got smoked and went back to cool season grasses. And that's why we still see some of that U3 or whatever the heck it was.
Yeah.
In some places, which was an ugly,
as big as my thumb. Yeah.
Dean, the stuff Dean Graves had was Chevy was beautiful. That Bermuda, that was fine textured. It was lovely stuff.
Yeah. You're definitely seeing a change. I mean, and the newer Bermuda grasses are amazing. I mean, the hybridization of Bermuda is just really coming into its own. And I think we're seeing some great stuff, but guys are definitely coming into this, into this Philadelphia North market with Bermuda grass, and it's working for the most part, which is kind of fascinating. You have to manage it a little bit differently maybe, but it's all good. So again, the future of the mix, what happens? Where are we going to be? Will we be at a 40% soil in the next 5, 10, 20 years? Will we ever, do anything silly like that? I mean, we still need drainage.
No.
What happens?
No, I remember, talking to, when I was in school, I used to argue with Watsky about straight sand top dressing. I said, shouldn't we do it gradually? Get sandier and sandier and sandier. And he says, look, Armen, you can make such an immediate change with straight sand top dressing. So I go to work for Richie at Marion, and he says, he goes, why don't you see if you can find some organic matter, find some spent mushroom soil or some peat or something. He goes, because we're going to make our top dressing for the year. I go, what? What do you mean make the top dressing?
We're making top dressing.
He goes, well, I got a load of soil coming. He goes, and he says, and we're going to, do this 8-1-1 mix. We got a Royer shredder and we had a screener and
making your own.
So I told him what Watsky was talking about. He said,
I'm not here.
Yeah, I'm not here. He said, that's my daughter calling. So that's the important.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
We'll be done soon.
So, so what he said was, I've been using this since I took over from my father, this 8-1-1 mix.
It was peat moss and soil. What was the 1-on-1?
The soil, the one changed all the time.
Oh, okay.
Could be mushroom soil, could be peat,
whatever
could be compost, depending on what he could get. Yeah. And it had the right texture. And He said, and before me, my father used this since he took over from William Flynn.
Yeah, and he wouldn't know anything.
He goes, and Flynn used this. He said, so it's worked pretty well for 70 years at that time. He said, so I think we should keep using it. And you know what? We ruined more great push-up greens with straight sand.
Yeah.
If we had continued on the 811, we wouldn't have had to be rebuilding all these push-up greens.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I mean, it just makes I mean, you think about it, it's common sense, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it's common sense. Armen, I hate to do this, but it's Friday night and I've got to go drink. Or I got guests waiting for me. But it's always a pleasure. And we'll have you back again because I always enjoy talking with you. And I look forward to our next Armen Suny chat. And my dear friend Ron says hi to you, by the way. I told him I was going to be meeting with you. So again, thank you so much. Everybody can find Armen. Where can we find you if we wanted to find you? Anyway, I should give you a little tag here.
Yeah, on the Copland, Keebler, and Wallace website.
There you go.
And then also on the Anarchist Guide to Golf Course Design Architecture, which I don't do much there anymore, but there's some good stuff in there.
Well, you should be there because that is the definition of Armen Suny. Armen, thank you so much for being with us as always, and I look forward to it. Have a great holiday. Enjoy World Soil Day. And I'm glad to hear that you're feeling better. I know it was a run there for a while, but now that your super immunity is in place, hopefully you can get back out and maybe we'll run into each other at the show in San Diego if they actually have it. I don't know if it will go off or not now, but we'll see. But anyway,
Joe,
thank you so much.
Joe, always a pleasure. And next time maybe we'll talk about zeolite and green sand.
Oh, I like that idea. That's something I can't find green sand anymore, but it's always
I figured it was tough.
Yeah. Armen, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a great holiday.
And everybody, thanks for watching the EarthWorks podcast. If you're not a subscriber, please subscribe to our show so we can tell you that we're getting great guests or when next time Armen Suny gets to come and meet with us. Thank you again.
All right. Bye. Thanks.